Welcome to another episode of Angel's Awesome Minds podcast powered by Angel's Awesome Books.
Ever feel like you're living in two different sensory worlds? I mean, like something that barely even registers for you sends your child, with autism or learning differences, just completely spiraling.
Oh, absolutely. It's like their volume knob is turned way up and we're trying to figure out how to adjust it, right?
Exactly. And it's so common, but also so confusing sometimes. So today we are diving deep, no pun intended, into sensory sensitivities in kids with autism. And we're going to use this amazing article called Understanding Autism and Sensory Sensitivity in Children from Angel's Awesome Books.
Yes, and their ebook, Tips for Autism and Developmental Delays, is a great resource too, full of practical advice.
Our mission today is to break this down for you. What is sensory sensitivity? Why does it happen? And most importantly, what can you do about it? What can you do to help your child thrive, right? Not just survive, but actually thrive.
Right. So first things first, let's define what we mean by sensory sensitivity.
Okay, imagine how we experience the world through our senses, sights, sounds, textures, all of that. Well, for some kids, that sensory information can be way more intense, like their senses are on overdrive.
Yeah, like everything's amplified, right? And that's what we call hypersensitivity. They might react to a loud noise like it's a jet engine taking off right next to them.
Exactly. And then there's the flip side, hyposensitivity, where they might not seem to register things that most people would. Like they might not even notice pain as much, or they're always seeking out really intense sensations.
Yeah, like bumping into things or spinning around and around. And the thing is, both of these, both hyper and hypo, are now recognized as core features of autism, right in the DSM-5.
So this is not just some little quirk. This is a fundamental part of how many autistic individuals experience the world.
Absolutely. And you see it in so many ways. Think about it, like maybe your child covers their ears in a crowded place, or they completely melt down over a scratchy tag in their clothes.
Or they might only eat foods with certain textures. My son went through a phase where he only ate, like, completely smooth things. No chunks, no lumps, nothing.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. And these are all coping mechanisms. They're not trying to be difficult. They're trying to manage a world that feels, well, just too much.
So let's talk about what's happening in the brain when this is going on. Do we know, what's causing these differences in sensory processing?
Well, the research is still ongoing, but we know that sensory information travels through different parts of the brain, like the thalamus, amygdala, and the sensory cortex. And in kids with autism, it seems like those connections and activity in these areas are just different.
Different how? Like, are the signals getting crossed?
It could be that the intensity of the signals is higher right from the start, or it could be that it just takes their brain longer to make sense of it.
Kind of like a traffic jam of sensory information.
Exactly. And that's where it gets overwhelming.
So as parents, I guess we have to become sensory detectives for our kids. Like, what are those specific things that seem to trigger these big reactions?
Yeah, figuring out those triggers is key. And some of the most common ones, just across the board, are loud noises like sirens or alarms.
Oh, yeah, those are big ones in our house. Even, like, the blender is a no-go sometimes.
Right. And then there are the visual triggers. Think bright or flickering lights, cluttered spaces, or busy patterns.
And of course, we can't forget about tactile sensitivities. So many kids struggle with clothing, textures, tags, seams. It's a constant battle sometimes.
Absolutely. And food textures, too, are a major one.
Right. And it's not just about being picky. It's that these things can actually be physically uncomfortable for them.
Exactly. And then you have smells. Strong odors like perfumes or cleaning products can be super intense for some kids.
So it's like all their senses can be affected in different ways.
Right. Even the sense of balance and movement, what we call the vestibular sense, or knowing where your body is in space, that's proprioception, those can be affected too.
Wow, it's amazing how much we take for granted, just being able to process all of that without even thinking about it.
It really is. So when we see our kids having those big reactions, it's important to remember that it's not coming from nowhere. It's a response to something in their sensory environment.
Okay, so let's talk about those reactions. Like, what are some of the ways sensory sensitivity actually shows up in our kids' behavior?
Well, one of the most common ones is the meltdown, right?
Right.
And that's a full-on emotional response to sensory overload.
Yeah.
It's like their system is just completely maxed out.
And sometimes it seems like it comes out of nowhere, but it's always tied back to something sensory.
Right. It might not be obvious to us, but it's always there. And then there's the shutdown, where they kind of withdraw and become nonverbal. It's like they're trying to block everything out.
And sometimes they just try to avoid certain situations altogether, like refusing to go to a birthday party because they know it'll be loud and chaotic.
And then there's stimming. Those repetitive movements or sounds, like flapping their hands or humming, that's a way of self-regulating. It can be really helpful for them to manage that sensory input.
So it's not always a bad thing.
Exactly. It's often a way of coping. And it's important to remember that all of these behaviors are their way of communicating with us. They might not have the words, but they're trying to tell us something.
So what can we do as parents? What are some practical strategies to support our kids with sensory sensitivities?
One of the most helpful things is creating sensory-safe spaces at home. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a quiet corner with soft blankets or pillows, a place where they can retreat when they're feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, we have a little tent set up in our living room, and it's like his little escape pod when things get too much.
That's great. And noise-canceling headphones can be a lifesaver too, especially in noisy environments.
Angel's Awesome Books also talks about sensory diets. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, it's basically about incorporating sensory activities into your child's routine. So if your child seeks out deep pressure, for example, you might give them firm hugs or roll them up in a blanket.
So it's not about restricting what they eat, it's about providing sensory input throughout the day.
Exactly. And visual schedules can be super helpful too. Knowing what to expect can really reduce anxiety and make transitions smoother.
And building in breaks, right? Like quiet time or even just a few minutes to jump on the trampoline.
Yes, and don't forget about co-regulation. When your child is dysregulated, being there with them, helping them calm down with deep breaths or a hug, can make a world of difference.
What about making our homes more sensory friendly? Any tips on that?
Yeah, think about using softer lighting, adding rugs and curtains to absorb sound, having a variety of textures in their toys and blankets. Even the colors you choose for the room can make a difference.
So just little adjustments can have a big impact.
Definitely. And there are some great tools out there too. We already mentioned noise-canceling headphones, but things like fidget toys and weighted blankets can be really helpful for some kids.
Trial and error is key, right?
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for your individual child. And as they get older, you can start to teach them how to advocate for their own sensory needs.
So when should a parent think about seeking professional help?
If sensory issues are really impacting your child's daily life, like if they're struggling to eat or get dressed, or if they're experiencing extreme distress, it might be time to talk to an occupational therapist. They can do a full assessment and help you develop a plan.
And I think it's important to remember that sensory sensitivities are a part of autism, but they're not the whole story, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every child is different. Their sensory experiences are going to be unique.
Going back to those common questions from parents, why is it that children with autism seem to have so many sensory issues?
It comes down to those differences in brain processing, how their brains interpret sensory information. And that can lead to either an overreaction or an underreaction.
What about meltdowns? How do you tell the difference between a meltdown and a regular tantrum?
A meltdown is a complete sensory overload. It's not about getting their way. It's a genuine distress response.
And do sensory sensitivities ever change over time?
They can. Some sensitivities might lessen as a child gets older, but new ones can emerge too.
And last but not least, the stimming question. Should we always try to stop it?
Generally, no. Unless it's harmful or really disruptive, stimming can be a really important way for them to self-regulate.
So the key takeaway here is to try to understand your child's sensory world, to see things from their perspective.
Exactly. And when we do that, we can start to create an environment where they can truly thrive.
And for all the parents listening, remember, you're not alone in this. There are so many resources out there.
Angel's Awesome Books, the ones who wrote that article, they have this fantastic ebook called Tips for Autism and Developmental Delays. And it's full of practical advice for parents.
You can find it on their website. And it covers so much, not just sensory issues, but communication, routines, all of it.
It's a great resource. As we wrap up here, I think the most important thing to remember is that your child's sensory experiences, even the challenging ones, are part of what makes them unique.
It's about seeing their differences not as problems to be fixed, but as different ways of experiencing the world.
And by supporting them in those experiences, we can help them reach their full potential.
Thanks for listening to Angel's Awesome Minds podcast. Don't forget to visit Angel's Awesome Books at angels-awesomebooks.com for more tips and resources.